The Marinade.
There's no O in Marinade. Let's try it one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
The Marinade.
Marinade.
Bone marinade.
That's
The Marinade.
The Marinade. With Jason Earle.
Couldn't hold you, but I dream that way sometimes.
Welcome to The Marinade with Jason Earle, a free-flowing conversation about the creative process with creative people. This is episode 124, and our guest is Shane Smith. Shane is the lead singer and principal songwriter for his band Shane Smith and the Saints. Shane Smith and the Saints hail from Austin, Texas. They have released 3 excellent full-length studio records, Coast, Geronimo, and their most recent album, Hail Mary, as well as a live recording, Live from the Desert. Their latest single is called Fire in the Ocean, and you are hearing a sample of that tune during this episode. Shane Smith and the Saints recently enjoyed a much-deserved bump in notoriety after their music was featured in the hit show Yellowstone. We caught up with Shane on the band's tour bus ahead of their performance at the Abbey in Orlando, Florida last week. Y'all, it is my great pleasure to bring you my conversation with Shane Smith.
Rather than use the Shure capsule, they'll literally take the Shure capsule off and put on the SEV7.
No shit.
And it's like $100 each.
All right, well, Patreon patrons, as you're listening to this,
exactly.
increase your, or if you're not a Patreon patron, go ahead and join so we can get the fancy. Shane Smith said so. Dude, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, no doubt, dude. Thank you for taking the time as well.
I appreciate it, man. I always put out on, speaking of Patreon and on Twitter, I always put out like who people want to hear from, right? And I've been listening to your music for a while, and your name comes up almost every time I ask that question.
That's awesome.
So we've got some folks listening who are like really, really big fans. And so I'm excited for myself, selfishly, because I'm looking forward to picking your brain. But also I'm stoked for our fans who've been asking for you for a while.
And to those fans, thank you. Love you guys.
Right?
We've got some awesome fans out there, man.
Man, I do want to talk about that. There's so much I want to talk to you about. And one of the things that today I was walking around, I went for a stroll, and I was just like listening to your records and spending some time with them. Mm-hmm. And I was just thinking about some of the things that I've noticed as like as themes to the music, and you have this ability to write these fucking bangers that are also dripping with imagery and tell these beautiful, incredible, layered stories. And we were talking earlier about some great songwriters, and some of them can do that, right? Some of them are able to mix those things, and then some of them it's much more about the story or the imagery, or it's about the melody. But for you guys, like, you're able to write these songs that are both something I want to stop and hear what you're saying, and then also get me fired up. Can you talk a little bit about like how aware you are or are not of that phenomenon, and like, is that something you're thinking about when you're writing?
Man, it's I think, look, overall I think our band has done this for such a long time that we've evolved over time, and it's kind of like changed a little bit over time, and like but even at its core, like in the first recordings, I think there was still an aspect to that of like like banger chorus meets like really heartfelt lyrics or whatever. Like there's some of that there also in the very first recordings. But I started out listening so much to like Adam Carroll and Ray Wiley Hubbard and these people like that, to where I put like this huge emphasis on I put like a really big emphasis on the lyrics like early on, you know. And then over time, you know, you start listening to different music and I think I started writing a lot toward like what I wanted the show to be like, and like how, you know, like what are we missing in our show to make it like bigger and more awesome. And because, you know, at the end of the day, like you can be like super passionate about one particular thing, like the lyrics, for example, but at the end of the day, it's like you're trying to make it also. You're trying to make a living. You're trying to like be able to pay the bills and just, I think over time, like I started like, you know, what am I doing wrong? You know, like having questions like that. And, but all the while it was also like, how can we make the show cooler? And so then it was almost like as a result of that, like having the grounds of really caring about the lyrics and then combine that with like, how cool can we make the show? It kind of turned into that type of thing, I think, over time.
When did do you want to, I don't want you to have to
Here,
stand there if you wanted to come through, yeah. You could add to the
Are
whole
y'all going to
experience.
Universal or no?
We didn't make it.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, we'll coordinate it.
That's a bummer.
It is a bummer, man. They have a deal that shows how long the wait is for each ride, like an app, and it was showing like 52-minute waits. So even if we got there right at 3:30, I'd get to hit 2.5 rides.
Yeah. It's not worth it.
So
Yeah.
it's all good. I pass out on roller coasters anyway, so it's probably not.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. He legitimately does pass out on roller coasters. Like I've had to like hold his neck up and stuff.
I
It,
mean, it's such a good thrill.
Man,
he loves it, but he
what?
literally blacks out in the middle
No, that's why I don't do it. That's
Yeah.
why I'm not dying on that motherfucker.
of it. Yeah.
I know people don't die, but whatever. Not my kind of party. Was there like you mentioned sort of, I forget the exact, we got to talking about roller coaster, so I forget the exact language you used, but there was a moment where you were talking, I think the words you used was like level up with a live performance. And was there a moment where you kind of had this realization of what you wanted to change, or was that just sort of like something that seeped into your consciousness?
I think it was just like, over time, it was like a subconscious thing. I was just kind of like, you just want the shows to be awesome, and you know, you want the energy to be awesome. And even like from the very get-go, it's like when we started playing like on 6th Street, like way back in the day, like we open all of our shows with that intro of Last of the Mohicans, that like really awesome, like anyways, it's just like this instrumental that we kind of made more into like a rock version of it. And we still today do that because it's like I care so much about like the show itself being like high energy, and like the fans, like getting the fans like jacked for the set and stuff like that. And so, you know, it's like, I guess it was technically, you know, I was thinking through that type of thing from the very get-go, but I don't know. I think over time it's definitely evolved, and the sound has evolved. Like, even like that new song that we just put out, Fire in the Ocean. It's like, if you listen to that, the lyrics are deep, but they're not like the focus necessarily of it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's more of like it's a big sounding song.
Yeah.
And the lyrics of it are, I think it hits home to a lot of people, but it's like not the total focus of it. And whereas at one point, I think the lyrics really were the focus, the total focus of it. And so my hope is that in terms of writing, I can turn into somebody that can churn out songs like what you're talking about, like consistently, where it's like, it's a banger song, it has high energy, it's like arena rock, but it has like some of the deepest lyrics, like, you know, that would just kind of like stop you in your tracks. You know, that's the goal, like, for sure, for me.
But I think that is so, and that's why I wanted to ask that question, because that, again, if I can think of a handful of folks that do it, but not many can pull that off.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's impressive, and maybe there isn't even a question in this other than just to compliment you, is that there's something that y'all do where you are able to maintain that balance. I mean, and that you're talking about the new song, like there's a lot in there as well, right? Like you're right. It is bigger maybe than some of the other stuff, but it's not like it's just hook driven or something. There's still plenty to latch onto and plenty to consider in that tune, and that is such a special thing to be able to capture that y'all do so well.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that a lot. I do. It's definitely the goal. Is that for me personally, like that's like the ultimate is, you know, if at some point we can be selling out like, you know, really big amphitheaters on our own, and you know, having these banger songs that people sing along on the choruses, but it's like people are also crying in the verses and stuff. You know what I mean? Like that's like the ultimate goal. Yeah,
you can. I mean, that's what y'all are doing. It feels to me at least like that's a trajectory that you're on, and but I'm interested in also taking it back a little bit to take, you know, to like the early days. You mentioned Austin, and I'm reading right now Her Country by Marissa R. Moss, and she's talking about like Casey Musgraves and Maren Morris and all these folks who are Texas folks who were Texas famous and then didn't really get to that amphitheater arena kind of level until they got to Nashville, until they made the move to Nashville.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that from your perspective, and y'all, you know, the choices that you're thinking about as you think about your career. You built this Texas famous thing. You're starting to get a lot more national notoriety, especially in the last few months. And I'm interested in that, like being rooted in Texas, right? And being a Texas band, but also as you think about the broader picture, how that impacts specifically your creative process and your thinking around writing songs.
Man, I'm trying really hard not to let it affect the writing. Like I'm really trying to not. I'm just thinking about our fans. Like what do our fans like, and what do I like? You know, what do I listen to? Me and the guys like? What do we think is cool? And there's certain things that we've done, and we've checked that box or whatever. And there's certain things we haven't done yet. And you know, But yeah, like, so we definitely did. We built up our fan base originally, like in Texas, and it was, you know, like that whole like red dirt Texas country world, and I've got to say something about that. Like, it's incredible that fan base exists, because I've toured in almost every state. You know, we as a band have played, I think, in almost every single state in the U.S. and I've never seen anything like that before. Our buddies that are in bands in you know, Portland, and our buddies that are in bands outside of DC and over in Virginia and these different places, like, they don't have that. Yeah. They don't know what that is. And you have to give props like to these like radio stations like 95.9 The Ranch in Fort Worth, Texas. Like, we probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that radio station like giving us all this love. Meanwhile, they have Clear Channel like mad at them that they're playing it, but it's like, no, they believe in it and they're like doing it. Coke FM in Austin, you know. I mean, there's like all these radio stations down there that have truly like given us love, and they have been the ones that you know, they influenced like all these blogs to start up and all these people to put on festivals. And like you know, originally you've got guys like Jerry Jeff Walker and people like that are building up these organic fan bases in Texas. And then, you know, that over time you end up getting like Pat Green. And then around that same time, you've got all these dudes in Oklahoma that are starting to get recognition in the same audience, you know, with Cross Canadian and Stoney and Jason Boland and all these guys. And it's turned into a really cool thing, you know, and it's kind of funny to me because it's like a lot of times when something's like really cool and really worth being envious of, people will talk trash on
Yeah.
it. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
100%, yeah.
And it's so hilarious to me how much trash the industry in Nashville talks on that.
Yeah.
And yet, meanwhile, you have these guys that can actually like push 4,000 tickets in a single night.
Yeah.
Maybe it is in Texas. Maybe it is in like 4 markets in Texas, but they could still push 4,000 tickets. You know what I
Yeah.
meit's like, I don't know. It's
But-
really cool. Like,
and that's because the songs are good and the bands are good, and you
Yeah.
know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
I agree with you, man. When I hear that,
well, it's
stuff,
organic. A
Yeah.
lot of it's organic,
Yeah.
you know, and I think a lot of it's becoming like a lot of the music. I'm not saying all the music there is good.
Sure.
Like, don't get me wrong. Like,
Sure.
there's a lot of it that isn't great. But at the same time, it's like, especially I feel like early on, you know, it was just like super organic music. You know, it was at the end of the day, it was like people playing what they were into, and no one was telling them what to write. No one was telling them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at like, I don't know, like look at Evan Felker and like
Yeah.
Turnpike and John Fulbright and, you know,
John Fulbright.
all these guys. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it's incredible the music that they wrote, you know, and
Yeah.
what Fulbright, you know, the stuff he puts out, and even John Moreland, and like,
Yeah.
there's just there's just a lot of really good music that comes out of there, and a lot of that gets bundled into the same thing. But I don't know, I just find it funny, like a lot of like the big music industry, like really talks down on all that. Oh, they're just like another Red Dirt act, like you know, we're gonna pass or whatever. And it's just like, man, I don't know, dude. There's a lot of like really
Yeah.
good stuff, and
When you label something like that, it's a lot easier
yes,
to talk down to
Yes,
it
it
than
is.
if you're actually taking each one of them at face value. That stuff changed the way I listen to music. I mean,
Yeah.
I can point to lots of moments in my life where I heard something and I went like, "Oh shit, this is a new portal in my mind." And when I was in college, that's when Pat Green and Corey Morrow and Jason Boland, you mentioned I saw Jason Boland at Billy Bob's right after college.
Mhm.
This is like the early 2000s for me, right? And
Mhm.
I'm seeing all these guys, and some of them at the time where we used to follow. Pat would come through the South, and we would go to Athens to see him, and we would go all over the place. We'd take road. We didn't have any money.
Right.
We'd just like go, and we'd camp in our cars to see Pat Green. And
Right.
every show he would stay after and take pictures with everybody.
Yeah.
And he put on the best fucking show you've ever seen, and the songs were great, and the energy was great. And at that time, you're talking about thousands of people in Georgia
Right.
going to see him, right?
Right.
So it's interesting how once you put a label on that, it's a lot easier to dismiss it
Yeah.
than when you're there in it and you see in those moments.
Yeah, and I feel like for us, we've always been, and I say this a lot in interviews, but I don't know of what other way to put it. I feel like we've always kind of been a little bit of an outcast, an outsider to
Yeah.
that scene. Like, you know, we were never the ones headlining. We were never the ones like with like top 5 radio in those markets, but we were always still playing those festivals and getting a lot, you know, getting some airtime on some of those bigger stations that are down there.
Yeah.
But you know, I definitely, I love that. I love the fact that we kind of straddle that line. I love the fact that, you know, we don't like, we're definitely looped in with all of it, and we are a part of it, and that is our like the core of our fan base, and they're like some of the best fans you could ever ask for.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, we have another foot that's in a much bigger pool, and I love having that balance of that, you know, and you know, having, you know, it's such a cool thought to me to have like almost like a you know, folk rock meets like Springsteen meets like, you know, Mumford and Sons or the Eagles or something like that. Just like a bigger sound, you know, but I love it that is such a big part of our fan base down there.
I think it's great, man, because you can do that and still write these incredible, like I said, these stories and these characters. So many characters in your songs. There's so many people that I can identify with that I want to latch on to. And when I listen to music, for me, I listen to all kinds of music for sure, but ultimately the stuff I gravitate toward is the stuff where the character is somebody that I can sink into a little bit, that I can see myself in, that I can see a friend of mine in, that I can see a loved one in.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I think really jumps out about your music, is that you are writing these songs that can exist in those worlds you just described. But also those characters and those the humanity to the people that you're talking about. Like, you're so good to those characters, and they clearly matter to you, and that comes through in the music.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it a lot. I don't know. I definitely, like, we've got some new music that we've recorded here recently that is definitely kind of more in the whole boat of like just like bigger sounding overall. You know, it still has our sound to it, has big harmonies and stuff like that, but it's not as focused around the storytelling side of it. You know what I mean? And so my hope though is that I can find that balance of just like, you know, accomplishing both, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's like the overall goal for sure.
Well, it's happening so far, and I'm sure it will continue to. One of the things that comes out to me, you know, today, especially as I was spending some extra time with your music, I was thinking about some of the religious or spiritual kind of themes that come through. Like when I was listening to Geronimo, there's a couple of songs that hit me about sort of like religion or spirituality. The obvious one being Right Side of the Ground, and like, it's something that we talk about on the show a lot: mortality, existence, spirituality. And I'm wondering what your relationship is like with mortality, spirituality, existence, and how much that plays into your writing.
It's a big part for sure. Like, I'm not necessarily like an extremely religious person, but I absolutely would call myself a Christian and a believer and a very spiritual person. I very much like am a believer with all that, and but at the same time, I'm not like, you know, I disagree with a lot of the stuff within, like, you know, the religion itself and the way that a lot of it's carried out, and like where a lot of the money goes that's raised and stuff like that. And you know, I think that it's incredible, but there's just some of that I disagree with, and I think I'm a little bit more open-minded when it comes to like just spirituality in general, and it's definitely a big part of my writing, and again, it's a huge part of humanity. It's like everybody relates to that to an extent, even if you're not a believer. Like, you know, what happened, you know, if you lose a loved one, or like, where'd they go? Like, we don't know. Like, I mean, that's something everybody deals with, and it's a extremely real, like very real thing. Yeah. And so it's a very big part of the writing, because, you know, it's very real to me, and it's really relatable, and it, you know, when you sing about stuff like that, it moves people, and yeah, like Right Side of the Ground, you mentioned that was something like my brother. He's a really funny character. One of my brothers, Connor, is always like, you know, joking around, and just always has these like hilarious kind of like one-liners or whatever. And, you know, somebody one night at a party was like, "Oh, so-and-so died." It was like some like celebrity or somebody. Was like, "Oh, shit, wrong side of the ground." Like, man, like, you know, you know, or something like that. And that kind of like stuck with me. And he is also someone who's gone through like really bad like relationship stuff early on. Like when we were in high school, like, had this girl that cheated on him like hardcore, and they were like, you know, I think he thought they were going to get married and all this stuff. It just like hit him real hard. It was, and I ended up writing that song kind of around that whole thing, you know, and just like the struggle of getting through that, and trying to come out on the other side, you know, a better person or whatever. But at the end of the day, that's tough, you know.
It's
that's
so
really
tough
stuff, and it's something you don't necessarily ever get over, you know, but you like get through it, and then you try to move on or whatever. And in the same way with death. And anyways, but that's where that kind of was the origin of that song, was from him and him saying that.
Such a tough. I mean, this has come up recently in conversation where I was talking about in your teens, late teens, and early 20s, when those things hit you, depending on your life experiences. But I think it's true for everybody in those, you know, and you just don't have the skills yet. You don't have the life experience yet, no matter what your life was like.
Yeah.
Some people already have more experiences than others. Some people are more emotionally mature than others at that point. But when that shit hits you then, it's not like it's easy in your 40s or in your 30s or whatever, or your 50s even, when you hit the really heavy stuff. But at that time, I look back on some of those times, like when I'm going through tougher times now, I try to lean on the experiences that I went through then. But I also am reminded of how much more intense it was when I was like 23 or 22 or 21 than once I've had the life experience, you know, to do that, to handle it. And I'm interested, like, in that. For you guys have been doing this longer than I think a lot of folks realize.
Yeah.
You know, and you've been writing pretty mature, very mature songs from a pretty early age. Did you feel like you were, like, you had a certain either life experience or you were an older soul or anything like that?
I totally think I'm an old soul for sure. And I think my wife is as well. She and I connect on that front, like, big time. And we'll find ourselves, like, I don't know why, but it's like we're always drawn to, like, the, like, really older, you know, figures, and, like, a lot of our loved ones in our lives and in our friend group and stuff. Like, even, like, you know, one of our biggest fans, this guy, Bob Dillard, Bobby D, we call him. But, like, I mean, it's like she and I think, are so drawn to, like the wisdom that a lot of these people, like, hold, you know, like older folks. And, like, and I think there's just something there that is reflected a little bit in the lyrics, like, you know. And it's been like that since I was, like, in high school. When I was, like, writing in high school, one of the first gigs I had, one of the first opportunities I had to, like, play the songs that I wrote from high school and in the beginning of college was when I was, I guess I was a freshman in college at this time, and I was living in Tyler, Texas, and going to Tyler Junior College, and there was a bar called XLN that was, like, right down the street, and it was like a pool biker bar type place, and there was this biker gang called the Cossacks that were, like, a really serious, like, biker gang. They were in that shooting in Waco that happened. It was, like, a real big shooting years and years later, but a lot of the heads of that biker gang would go and hang out there after hours, and I would go over there because I got to be friends with the general manager, this guy named Sean, and he would let me play for these guys. And I was, like, probably 19 or something at the time, and so I had no business, you know, whatever, like, being in there, but he would let me go in there to play for these guys, and they were literally selling meth, like, right in front of me and stuff. And, like, there would be, like, strippers come over when they were getting off their shift, and be like 4 a.m, and we're out there and I'm singing, and oddly enough, one of those dudes, this older guy, his nickname was like Bear or Big Bear or something like that, like this big old dude, looked like David Allen Coe kind of, and he was like, "Man, you're singing about stuff, like, way beyond your years, man. Like, what is going on here?" And I think it's literally just kind of that, like, that old soul, whatever that concept is. It's just like, I'm just interested in things that I think a lot of older people would be, you know, interested in. I don't know. Yeah. It's weird, but even at that point, I remember, like, kind of that was acknowledged to me for the first time when I was, like, 19, and someone was like, "Hey, you're, like, writing stuff that's, like, you should be writing different stuff than this at the age of 19. Like, your interest should be on some different stuff than, you know, than, like, the, you know, describing, like, wrinkles on a face or like on a hand, or like you know, like veins, like roots in the ground and shit, you know, just weird, you know, metaphors and stuff like that." and anyway, so I definitely just think it's something that's, you know, everybody's interested in their own type of thing, and for some reason I'm drawn to stuff that a lot of older people are drawn to also, lyrically, you know.
It makes me think of that. I wish I'd written down this particular lyric that hit me earlier about the snow in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of your songs. I'm trying to think of what the fucking lyric was, but whatever it was, the way you described it was so, like, it just felt like this incredibly perceptive way to describe the scene, and I wish I could think of the fucking.
It's like in All I See Is You.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
It's like like the nights in Salt Lake City where the snow fell down too soon.
Yes,
people
the snow
laughed and howled from their beers, but all I could see was you.
Yes.
Or whatever. Like
where the
just
snow
kinda,
fell down too soon. That's such a simple thing that's not so simple, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's such a simple thing that does happen, and that it does then lead to those interactions between human beings, and it changes people's behavior. And it's such a perceptive thing, you know, and that...
But that's also, like, that goes back to, like, the dudes I was listening to in high school, like, and college, is, like, the Adam Carroll, you know, Hayes Carl does that type of thing a lot. Adam Carroll does, Ray Wiley does it. Like, a lot of those people are very descriptive and very imagery based with their lyrics, like painting, like setting the scene, you know, in your mind to visualize what's going on. And I've always been drawn to that, like, big time on, like, the visuals of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's probably because I'm dumber than the average person.
Well, I doubt that's the case. Are you, like, but are you a visual learner?
Yeah, very much a visual person.
Which does not make you any less intelligent than anybody else.
Not the sharpest tool in the thing. But I've always been very much like a visual type of person, and yeah, I think a lot of, you know, that goes back into, like, what you're saying. I think it in turn ends up being sounding kind of a little bit beyond the years or whatever whenever you're writing it, but at the end of the day it's just kind of being more visual and, like, paying attention to stuff like that. I
love that. I feel like there's a big writing lesson in that, because it sounds like you're almost discounting your ability with words. You're almost, and there may be just some modesty in that, is what you're kind of expressing here. But you know, for me as a writer, I'm constantly thinking about the words themselves. Whatever I'm writing, I'm, like, really in the weeds about my word choice and thing. And Hayes is that way too, I think. Hayes was a couple episodes ago. I interviewed Hayes, and
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing. And he seems to think about it in that way, based on lessons he learned from people like Guy Clark and Ray Wiley Hubbard that you mentioned a couple of times. But it sounds like there's a great I'm learning here as I hear you to think about, like, that you are picturing this scene and then you're going to those words, whereas it feels like a lot of times when I sit down to write, I'm so caught up in the weeds of the words that I'm not as much just letting the picture flow.
Yeah, I think there's some back and forth with that. I think, like, there's certain times where you hear a line. It's like what I was talking about, my brother saying that, you know, is on the wrong side of the ground or whatever, just, like, lightheartedly saying that. Like, that's, like, a line that might stick with you, and then, you know, you save that for later, and then all of a sudden it becomes something. And then, you know, just as equally, though, like, you might have some very visual thing that you're trying to, like, just, like, paint a picture of, and so the words that come out, they just kind of, like, come out, and then you might have to rework them or whatever, but it's kind of, like, based around a visual that's in your mind, you know?
Before we started rolling, you and I were talking about James McMurtry, and that's how he describes his process, that he hears a line and that the songs come from lines. Yeah. Which made it very difficult to get into his process too, because, like, as I was talking to him years ago trying to interview him, it's like, well, how do you replicate that? I don't know. I guess you either have it or you don't, or maybe it's a practice thing, but that really struck me, and I've heard him say it in other interviews too, how it comes from the line, and then once he has the line, then the rest of the story kind of comes, you know?
Yeah, there's a line that I'm working off of right now that I randomly thought of, and it was, I just thought it was kind of cool. She never could escape my mind, and it's like, you know, as if there is an actual person, like, trying to get out. It's like, I can't get over her, you know? It's like, it can't, like, I can't let it go or whatever. And it's like, you know, seeing it as that. You know?
I love it. Does she want to be lost in there? Does she not want to be lost in there?
Yeah, like,
could she get out if she had? I love
kind
it.
of creating a character out of, like, a mourning. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
But
I hope that comes.
And so
forward.
that right there
Yeah.
is like an example of like that. That's more of a line-based thing. It's still a visual thing, if you think about it.
Yeah.
But it's a very visual thing.
Yeah.
But it's also more. There's a song that will eventually be something kind of based more around that line.
Yeah, for sure. Can we go back to the biker bar for a second?
Yeah.
Because I'm interested in, when you first started telling that story, I'm picturing like that they're going to want to hear David Allan Coe and like Hank Williams Jr. and stuff. But it sounds like you were playing a lot of your own stuff.
Yeah. I was singing a lot of my own stuff and stuff that I was just excited to play for somebody because I was writing so much at that time. I was like still so new to writing, but it's like, like riding a bike or something. Like once you get it, all of a sudden you want to ride your bike like everywhere, you know? And I think it was like that for me with the songwriting. Like once I had a couple under my belt and it was almost like, okay, I can do this. Like, just it was like, okay, I can't do this enough. I'm just like constantly going to be working on this. And I mean, the songs are for the most part horrible, but still it was like that feeling of like you're just excited to get it out. And so once you do get those out, like you're so excited to play them or sing them for somebody, and that was an opportunity for me to like just sing songs in general for somebody and get comfortable with that, because that took a long time to get comfortable, singing in front of other people.
How did you know A, that you were comfortable, but also that you went from these songs that you look back on maybe and are like, these weren't all that great, to songs that you started to become proud of or started to go like, oh shit, I kind of got something here?
I was never comfortable doing it, like for a long time.
Okay.
Like for years. I would make myself like, I was excited about the songs or whatever, but I was also like I remember like I sang in like a talent show when I was like a senior in high school in Kaufman, Texas, where I went to high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember I was like scared to death. Like I was so scared. And then same thing, like by the time I was in Tyler, I was uncomfortable with it, but I was okay because I got real comfortable just singing, to a group of friends and stuff. Like I got past that phase of it in Tyler, like where you just like get comfortable singing a song for your buddies or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was essentially like that to me, just like singing for a group of buddies, like those dudes, that would show up. And but it was like going and doing the song, like the open mic nights. Like I remember when I moved to Austin for the first time, I was trying to finish college, and every week I had a calendar of every single open mic night I could find in the city of Austin, which there's a lot of them. I would go to like 4 of them each night. A lot of times, like I would go and hit like as many as I could, these open mic nights. Yeah. And I was just trying to find, for one, I knew I was going to have to do that and get used to it or whatever, but I also was just trying to get some kind of a gig, like some kind of an acoustic gig somewhere, because I knew that was just going to have to happen in order to make any headway at it, and it's like you can look up to different figures. Like I really looked up to, I still do, like look up to like Ray Wiley, for example, or like to these different musicians. But then all of a sudden there's a moment of like, holy crap, you got to play in front of people and like get comfortable. and it's almost like realizing like, you got to do that. If you want to try to make a living at this and you want to try to do this, like you're going to have to get past that. And I think that was me trying to force myself to like get comfortable. And so it's like, just throw yourself in there and try to get comfortable with it. And that's why I wanted a gig, I think, so bad. It wasn't like I was trying to make money or whatever at that time. I think I was just trying to force myself, like throw myself to the wolves, almost like you have to get used to this, at some point. And a weekly gig or like every other day type of gig would that's 3 hours. I knew that would make it happen quicker than anything. And so then before long, you're doing like margarita night, dollar margarita, happy hour at El Arroyo every single Thursday. And then Whiskey Wednesdays every single Wednesday at Shiner Saloon, and then Hills Cafe Tuesday. You know, it's like you just start doing that, and then that's when you really, you know, I think that's when I started getting really comfortable with it.
Man.
But I don't know that there's been much of a moment for me personally where I'm like, I think I've got something here or whatever, like with the songs. I mean, there's been some really cool moments, but I think I get so locked in, like super focused during the show where I'm like not really absorbing it as much as a lot of people maybe can. And I think I'm more like, it's more of an output than an input, like the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I'm like not necessarily taking a ton of it in. And it's like it's probably a unhealthy habit or whatever, but it also is like, I come from a family that was like a lot of athletes, and like, oddly enough, me and all my brothers, when we were little, my parents had us playing tennis when I was a kid, and like we played tennis like all the way like through college, me and my brothers, and you know, it's kind of odd being in like a little kind of country town or whatever, and like, you know, there's not really many people to relate to on that, but like that's what they had us do, and so that's what we did. And but my dad was, you know, he was a kicker for Notre Dame and for the Kansas City Chiefs for a short period of time, and his dad was like a legend, like football legend at Notre Dame back, you know, way back in like the 50s or something, and so I've been surrounded by coaches my whole life. My mom's dad was a football coach. My dad's dad was a coach. Like my dad was a coach for, you know, like any of the kickers, like in the local football, you know, teams around. Like he would go and like try to mentor the kickers and stuff like that. And so it's like, I think that was so like hardwired in me where it's just like, no, like focus, like it's like, you know, that whole like it's game time or whatever. It's like you're not soaking in what the audience is doing in the stands. You're not like absorbing the moment. You're focused on kicking a field goal from 60 yards out in between these two uprights, and you can't think about anything else. You know, like and I think that type of thing was like, and I wasn't a kicker. I'm just saying like the mentality of like the way we were raised as kids. It was so focused, like as if a coach was raising you almost like. That I think that it's like kind of hardwired in me. My wife is almost like gets on to me a lot and is like, you've got to like learn to kind of absorb some of these moments, and you know, but at the end of the day, I just want to like, you know, make sure it's as good as it can be and just focus on the show, you know.
That's so great. I think in tennis especially is so it's so focus
only
driven.
You. It's like it's
just you.
Same as boxing. It's same as golf. I mean, it's like you and your mind is going to win or lose that situation.
I feel like that's an advantage in a lot of ways as a performer.
It is, but it definitely will cause you to, like, you know, y'all can come through if y'all need to.
Yeah.
It definitely is, but it will it'll definitely kind of hardwire your brain to be more, like, focused on just, like, getting through it and being, like, it's all output, like I was saying before. It's like all focused on like delivering, you know?
Yeah. Man, that's so great. You've been so generous with your time and energy and everything. We usually end on the art that has you inspired at the moment. Could be music you're listening to, could be a painting you saw, could be a film you saw recently, or what's got you fired up right now?
Man, I think what's got me motivated right now is seeing a lot of these younger dudes come out of the woodwork as like songwriters and like really putting a lot of focus on it. Like, I've been fortunate to like get to know like Zach Bryan recently and like Charles Wesley Godwin and a lot of these guys. It's like a new generation kind of coming up, and I just really appreciate how much they care about the words, you know, and how much like of a focus there is with that. And like, especially Zach, like Zach's working his ass off and just always writing. And I just think that's super cool. And it's inspiring me to kind of like tap back into that like version of myself at 19, like, and you know how just stoked I was to try to tell a story, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like it's a pretty cool full circle thing right now where I'm getting to see a lot of this, and just another thing that excites me is like almost like the barriers and the walls of genres being broken down, and just like music is just at a really cool creative place right now, and it's just exciting, and I'm also excited that people are able to do it without massive gatekeepers anymore, you know, and people are able to just get out there and either work your ass off or don't, but you know, you have the opportunity if you want to, whereas in the past, like, you could work your ass off all you wanted, but there were some serious gatekeepers you had to, you know, persuade in order to be successful. Like, you know, I think back on like Otis Redding and, you know, all these guys like way back in the day, Sam Cooke, even Elvis, you know.
Yeah.
You had to be in with the gatekeepers or you had no hope at doing anything. And right now there's just a lot of people that are able to do stuff without all that, and that's an inspiring thing and pretty cool.
That's great. I just read in that book I referenced earlier, Her Country, which I can't say enough about if folks listening or if you haven't read it. She was talking about Isabel's Southeastern and how that was a shift, and how like that being on his record label and 30 Tigers putting it out, and like everybody knew his talent already. Yeah. But now it's just like it was him doing his own thing the way he wanted to do it on his terms, and then of course it's one of the greatest American folk records of all time, you know, and has ushered in and has inspired people like, or before we went on mic, we talked about Tyler Childers, who has inspired all these guys that you just mentioned, and all these other folks. And I think the other point that you brought up that I don't know if I've mentioned on the show before, but that that means a lot to me is looking at, because I think people my age, I'm 42, my age and older, there's a tendency in a lot of them to look at younger generation, especially younger generations of folks who grew up with phones and ubiquitous internet, and to discount them or to dismiss them because of habits that they developed just based on how the world is. Yeah. And my experience as an educator by day and as someone who spends a lot of time around young people is that they're fucking great, man. They're committed to art. They're creative. They're committed to fashion. They're doing things with fashion, for example, that's melding different generations. It's not like they're just throwing back the 90s with something. It's like they're putting their own twist on all these different influences, and they're making really cool things. And they're using digital mediums to then expand their horizons in ways that weren't available to people before, but also that, like, the kids are fucking all right, man. They are all right. You know? Yeah. And I think I too am inspired by young songwriters that are able, and authors, you know, folks that are in their 20s and writing just jaw-dropping stuff, you know?
I think the only disconnect there is, like, this is the only important thing that I would say as a rebuttal to that is if they're grounded. Because people are so, like, and it goes back to, I think, the old soul thing. I think a lot of, like, people in that wheelhouse are kind of instinctively grounded in a weird way. Like, just because you're, I don't know. It's weird. But, like, the only concern that I have with, like, the generations coming up, because I agree with you on all of it, the only concern that I have is anybody grounded anymore? Like, in what's real? Like, you know what I'm saying?
I do, yeah.
And it's so easy to not be grounded these days with all the distraction, you know, because it takes I think almost like it takes like a level of focus to be grounded and to, like, you know what is important and what is, like, life about, what is, like, what is spirituality, what is, like, you know, I don't know. I think it's one of those things. That's the only thing I'm, like, really concerned about with like with all of, like, the digital mediums and stuff, and how, like with people's attention spans and things like that. It's like, as long as everybody, like, stops and remembers to, like, get real, be grounded, like, and get deep,
Yeah.
And that's the only thing. But even myself, like, I'm finding myself like,
yeah,
dude, like, get off your phone,
100%, dude.
like,
yeah,
all of that.
I use it as I'm learning, I use it as an escape. Like, I've been going through kind of a rough patch lately, and I use it a lot of times to just like, and it's not even necessarily social media. It's like the New York Times games, I'm like playing Wordle, and which is great.
Yeah.
Spelling bee, and it's like, instead of actually sitting and meditating and dealing with the shit I need to deal with, there's so many easy apps I can pull up and be like, all right, I'm on Reddit for the next 5 minutes because I don't want to fucking deal with the depression that I need to deal with.
Totally.
Give me that hit of dopamine, baby.
Exactly. Yeah. Anything we can get here.
Yeah, and it is harder to zoom out, as a result of that too. I think to then get grounded, right? To be able to have that perspective.
Totally, and be able to have like a deep conversation with somebody without a phone involved anywhere, or like a phone to like make it less awkward, or like whatever, you know what I'm saying? Like those, I hope that those younger generations are able to do that and like accomplish that, despite all the distraction.
Yeah. Well, I think we pulled it off. I don't think either one of us looked at our phone this entire time.
I think we
made
set.
it. Yeah. Dude, this has been such a pleasure. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. It was good getting to know you, and
likewise.
I'm sure I'll be seeing you as we come out here more often.
For sure. That's awesome.
My way back to your arms. Back to your arms.
Shane Smith, y'all, thank you so much, Shane. Thank all of you for listening. ShaneSmithMusic.com for all things Shane Smith and the Saints. Once again, the song you are hearing in this episode is the latest single from the band called Fire in the Ocean. I want to thank everybody in Shane's camp for making this happen, y'all. I try to shout folks like that out and want to do a better job of it. If you're a fan of this band, just know that everybody involved is professional and generous and sweet as can be. Everybody was awesome. Everybody from Shane to tour managers to everybody I dealt with was just so wonderful. And, this is pretty much the experience I typically have, thankfully. But I just want to once again say, hey, look, if you're a fan of that band, also know they seem to be some really great people too. MarinadePodcast.com for all things The Marinade, including written pieces, photography, our online store, which is lacking and I need to update, and more. Follow us on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Subscribe and give us a 5-star rating on your podcast app. Tell a friend about the show. These are all free ways to support The Marinade. If you really like what we're doing, please consider joining our Patreon community, where for just a few bucks a month, you can gain access to Patreon exclusive content like our show, Jason's Journey, where I talk about the moments that shape my creative life and provide a window into the process of making the marinade. We also have a brand new monthly show called What We're Getting Down On, which is a conversation between myself and my great friend Peter Haraldson. The first episode is available for free at patreon.com/marinade podcast. It's also available on the normal Marinade feed. I defended in that episode the much derided David O. Russell film Amsterdam that I thought was outstanding. And Peter talked about his video game of the year, Citizen Sleeper. Check it out and let us know what you think. Peter and I have a lot of common interests, but we also, our interests diverge quite a bit. So it's super fun to talk to Peter. He ends up getting me into comic books that I wouldn't have otherwise found. He's really into video games. I listen to music and watch films that maybe he wouldn't necessarily be as interested in unless it was brought to his attention. It's a lot of fun, and he's a dear, dear friend. We've known each other for a long time. Folks seem to be liking it. I hope you are. We're having a blast making it, and the next episode will be coming at you in just a week. So check out Patreon for that. Also on Patreon is our show Inner Child, where I ask our guests kind of like childlike questions such as favorite food, TV show, that sort of thing. My Inner Child with DL Rossi will be up on Patreon as soon as I finish recording this. And we just had so much fun, y'all. Patreon.com/Marinade Podcast if you're interested. If you want to support the show financially, but you don't want to commit to a monthly subscription, maybe you just really liked this episode and want to give us a tip, you can Venmo or PayPal us at The Marinade. All the money goes right back into making the show, and right now that means saving up to cover some festivals. We've been invited to some very cool events through all of the wonderful support from every one of you and the work that we've been able to do. And in order to do that, in order to cover these festivals and get to travel a little bit, we need to figure out how to pay for those experiences. But above all, no matter what, I'll always say this, I'm just so thankful that you listen. I'm so thankful you're listening. I'm so thankful you're spreading the word. I'm so thankful you interact with us on Twitter. I'm grateful for your emails, your DMs. They're always open to y'all if you want to reach out and connect in that way. I'm just really, really thankful that we're able to do this work and we're able to reach the audience that we are. Until next time, go out and create something. Cheers, y'all.